Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. My parents passed away when I was very young. Before they died, they had helped the Carter family through some of their hardest times. Out of a sense of obligation, or maybe just to repay a debt, they took me in and let me live with them in the countryside. With Mr. and Mrs. Carter's backing, I eventually married Jason Carter, their only son and the boy I grew up with. But I never knew that he already had someone else he truly loved. After we got married, he refused to touch me, yet let me carry the blame for being infertile. His parents blamed me constantly, and at the same time brought over 2 children from a distant relative and handed them to me to raise. Meanwhile, Jason joined the military and disappeared from our lives, barely returning even once a year. 18 years later, I had raised those 2 children into respectable adults, and they both got accepted into Tingway University. Jason came back, bringing another woman with him to attend the celebration banquet. Right there in front of everyone, he announced that the 2 children were biologically his and that woman's. I watched as the 6 of them stood together like a warm, happy family. And only then did I realize I had been the only one kept in the dark all along. Crushed by despair, I left. In the thick of night, I accidentally slipped and fell off a cliff. When I woke up, I found myself back in the first year of my marriage. Jason's mother sat solemnly in the family hall while his father smoked his pipe nearby. The small room was nearly packed with distant relatives. Aside from Jason's parents and Jason himself, who was holding 2 children, everyone else was sneaking glances at me. I stood silently at the doorway. Mrs. Carter cleared her throat and spoke up. "Lily, you're just in time. This child is from Aunt May over in Green Hill Village. She just had a baby. It's her 4th kid already. I heard you and Jason are having trouble conceiving, so she sent the baby here to see if you'd like to raise him." I glanced across the room and saw Emily Stone blending into the crowd, looking affectionately at the child in Jason's arms. So, it turns out even back then, Emily had already entered my life quietly behind the scenes. Everyone waited for my answer, but Mrs. Carter looked calm and certain, as if sure I wouldn't refuse. After all, for the entire past year, she'd asked me about my wound 3 times a day until my face turned pale from guilt and shame. I asked Jason, "Do you want to raise them?" He acted like he knew I'd ask and responded without hesitation, "That's a woman's business. If you want to, I won't stop you." "All right then. I don't want to raise them, but since you do, you'd better give it your full attention. Don't waste their parents' kind intentions." "What did you just say?" Jason looked at me stunned and in disbelief. The room fell silent. Even the hushed whispers died down. I replied calmly, "I'm only 19. There's no proof I can't get pregnant. Why should I raise someone else's kids?" Jason stared at me full of disapproval. "How can you be so unreasonable? Aunt May meant well. I didn't think you'd be so short-sighted." I shot back. "Didn't you just say this had nothing to do with you? So, why are you so upset now that I said no?" Jason's eyes widened like he couldn't believe I'd stand up to him. Mrs. Carter quickly tried to ease the tension. "Don't say things you'll regret, Jason. I know you like those kids. If you want to raise them, I'll help support you." Mr. Carter took a puff of his pipe and added, "If we're going to raise them, we'll open the family registry tomorrow and record their names under Lily and Jason's." A cold bitterness rose in me. In my past life, Mrs. Carter's so-called support was really just her watching over me, never helping. As for washing their clothes, paying for their needs, and doing homework with them, almost all of it was on me. They only came to harvest the fruits of my labor. They never considered me, not even once. Now facing their one-sided decision again, I raised my voice. "I'm not raising them. If you register them under my name, I'll file for divorce." Without waiting for their stunned reactions, I turned and walked away. I went to the village post box. There I found a letter addressed to me. I opened it and my eyes filled with tears. Inside was a 100 yuan note and a bundle of food and fabric ration tickets, things incredibly precious in the scarcity of the 1980s. The letter came from Grandpa Lewis, my parents' university professor, who'd always treated me like his own granddaughter. In my past life, I only learned after the children had been raised and gotten into Tingwa that he'd been silently supporting me all those years. But all of that had been hidden from me by Jason's parents. Inside the mailbox, I also found my Tingwa University acceptance letter. In my last life, the Carters had hidden it just to break my wings completely. They wanted me to quietly stay with the Carter family, working like a mule. I walked to the village entrance and greeted Aunt Wanda, who ran the small general store. I told her I needed to make a call to one of my parents' old friends. Aunt Wanda had practically watched me grow up in the Carter household, and she understood how bitter it was to live under someone else's roof. She didn't even take the ration coupons I offered for the call. She just told me to use the phone freely. She had to step out to deliver something and asked if I could watch the store for her. I gratefully accepted her kindness and silently vowed I would repay her someday. Then I dialed the number I remembered from this lifetime. The line rang 3 times before it was answered. A deep, weathered but powerful voice came through. "Hello, who is this?" My throat tightened. "Grandpa Lewis, it's me. It's Lily." "Lily, my little girl, finally remembered this old man," he said, sounding overjoyed. When I told him I had once again been admitted to Tingwa University, he became even more excited. "Your parents, God rest their souls, would be so proud of you. They'd be over the moon to know how well you've done." I told Grandpa Lewis about my current situation and let him know I'd be returning to Beijing in 3 days to wait for the start of the semester. When he heard what I had gone through, his tone became somber and regretful. He blamed himself for not protecting me properly back then. But when I told him my decision, he was fully supportive and urged me to stay with him once I got to the city. After the call ended, I finally let out a long breath of relief. I took the letter and the university acceptance notice and carefully hid them in a spot only I knew about. Just 3 more days and I could finally change my destiny. When I returned to the Carter house, most of the relatives had already left. Only Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Jason, and Emily Stone remained. Emily was still holding one of the children in her arms. I quietly walked in without making a sound, just in time to hear Emily speaking anxiously. "Jason," she said, "if Lily doesn't want to raise them, what are we going to do?" Jason's voice was cold and firm. "She'll raise them whether she wants to or not. I'm going off to join the army in a month, and you're going to college. Who's going to take care of the kids otherwise?" Mrs. Carter chimed in to back her up. "Don't worry, Emily. A child's mother should be someone educated like you. Lily grew up in our household. She wouldn't dare disobey us." Mr. Carter puffed out his chest like the head of the family and said decisively, "It's settled then. She doesn't get to call the shots in this house." There was no emotion left in me. In my previous life, whatever feelings I'd had were worn away by years of exhaustion and betrayal. I stepped into the room. All 4 of them turned toward me surprised. Each one tried to read my face and figure out how much I'd heard. I looked directly at Emily. Maybe out of guilt, she turned her head away and avoided my eyes. Jason stood in front of her and looked at me seriously. "This is my cousin Emily," he said. "She's been accepted into a teacher's college and will be staying with us for the next month." I nodded without a word and pretended not to have heard anything. Behind me, Mrs. Carter let out a quiet breath of relief. After dinner, I went straight back to my room and began packing. I gathered anything that reminded me of Jason and separated it from the rest, placing it all to the side. I didn't have many things to call my own, just one winter coat and a few light summer outfits. Compared to the thick wool coat Emily wore, my belongings weren't even worth half a meter of fabric. If I remembered correctly, Emily's coat had been made from the very same fabric coupons Grandpa Lewis had mailed to me. Though he sent a large sum every month, most of it had been taken by Mrs. Carter. Very little ever reached me. They raised me, yes, but they did it using the money Grandpa Lewis sent. In a way, they had already been compensated. As for Grandpa Lewis, I would find a way to pay him back every last cent. Then, for the first time in forever, Jason actually walked into my room without even knocking. He tossed a wool scarf onto the bed, speaking in a tone that felt more like charity than apology. "I've neglected you since we got married. I brought this back from the city for you." I glanced at the scarf. The pattern was nearly identical to the one on Emily's coat. It must have been made from leftover scraps, and yet he had gone out of his way to bring it back and throw it at me like some act of generosity. Jason thought my silence meant I was deeply moved by the scarf. So he seized the opportunity to push further. I'll be joining the army in a month. You need to pay more attention to those 2 kids, he said. Then after a short pause he added, our parents raised us. It wasn't easy. You should learn to be more mindful at home. Do more around here. Wash the dishes, clean clothes. Don't be like tonight, acting like it's none of your concern. I nearly laughed out loud. Aren't you the one leaving in a month for the army? Why don't you share some of the chores with your parents before then? Jason hesitated for a moment, then said, of course, I'll do my part too. Just then he noticed the notebook and woven bracelet he'd once given me, now tucked away in the corner of my desk like forgotten trash. What are these doing here? He asked. I replied casually, I was just cleaning up. What needs to be thrown out should be thrown out. His brows furrowed, and something inside him seemed to stir uncomfortably. He stepped toward my suitcase, looking like he was about to go through my things. Before I could stop him, a sweet, delicate voice called out, Jason, there's no hot water left. He turned and quickly walked away, heading to the bathroom to heat water for Emily. He didn't return for the rest of the night. The next day, I didn't get out of bed until noon. Mrs. Carter didn't scold me for sleeping in. She was pacing around the main room, looking flustered and muttering. How could it not be there? Where could it have gone? Did they decide not to send it after all? Amused, I watched her from the doorway. I already knew exactly what she was looking for. Mom, I said lightly, what are you looking for? She paused and gave me a once-over, her gaze unsure, but she convinced herself there was no way I could know anything about it. It's nothing. The kids are hungry. Go make them some formula. I smiled coldly. Jason should do it. He's the one who will be gone in a month and won't see them again. Before she could put on her usual act, I turned and dashed out the door. I knew she'd gone to the mailbox that morning and hadn't found the food coupons and money Grandpa Lewis had sent me. Now she was panicking. In the past, they had secretly used all of it for the Carter household, except for me. In my previous life, Jason had relied on that money to grease palms and build connections, eventually landing himself a decent post. With his smooth talking and well-timed flattery, he climbed the ladder and became a department head 18 years later. And Emily's entire college tuition and expenses had basically come from my envelope, too. They enjoyed all the privileges I brought into their lives, yet believed it was all perfectly justified. As if the world was supposed to give them such gifts without cost. I headed to the village youth center. It was filled with Jason's usual crowd, his rowdy close-knit friends, and of course Emily. Before I even got close, I heard one of his old buddies joking around. Hey Jason, you really spoil Emily. How can you even bear to let her leave for college? Emily was curled up in his arms, shy and bashful. Stop talking nonsense. I just see Jason as an older brother. That only made the guy laugh louder. Older brother? More like a boyfriend. Everyone around them burst into laughter. The atmosphere was cheerful and light. Jason looked pleased, wrapping his arm around Emily. Even after you go to the city, don't forget me or the kids. Emily looked up at him, blushing, and planted a kiss on his cheek. I won't, she said softly. Then the topic shifted to me. Jason's expression turned more serious. I heard him say, Lily's tough. She's the type who should stay home to take care of my parents and the kids. When it comes to talent and education, she's nothing compared to Emily. It felt like someone had slammed a hammer into my chest. Even though I already knew how heartless he could be, it still made me feel furious and humiliated. I thought about everything I'd given up in my last life. My education, my future, even my identity. 20 years of thankless effort. And this was all he had to say about me. Just then, a young woman came in from outside. She spotted me and looked surprised. Lily, what are you doing here? Come in. The lively room instantly fell into an awkward silence. Everyone turned to look at me, and their expressions were stiff and unnatural. Jason and Emily jumped to their feet and took a step away from each other. Emily gave me a guilty look. Lily, you came without saying anything. Jason's eyes were sharp with a hint of annoyance. Why aren't you at home watching the kids? What are you doing here? I glanced at him and noticed the faint smear of lipstick on his cheek. A sarcastic smile tugged at my lips. Emily rushed to grab a tissue. Emily awkwardly wiped Jason's cheek, trying to cover it up. Lily, it's all my fault. Jason and I were just joking around. Jason looked guilty for a second, but quickly composed himself and replied righteously. Emily and I grew up like siblings. There's nothing to hide. Maybe he was worried I'd call him out. His tone suddenly grew irritated. Lily, can you stop being so paranoid all the time? It's because of that attitude that I don't want to come home. You know, if only you had even a little of Emily's gentleness. Jason. I cut him off. Only then did he seem to realize he had gone too far, and he finally shut his mouth. The 2 kids you were so determined to adopt yesterday, they're hungry, I said calmly. Your mom asked you to come home and make their formula. I finished my sentence as if I hadn't seen the embarrassed look on his face. But since I'd clearly refused to adopt the kids yesterday, he couldn't refute anything I said. Left with no other choice, he followed me home. Emily bit her lip and came trailing behind. At dinner, Mr. Carter informed me the kids had already been registered at the family hall. I nodded and said nothing. Mrs. Carter gave Jason a meaningful look. It's almost autumn, and Lily's clothes are getting worn out. Jason, take her to the city in 2 days to buy some new ones. Jason looked at me and hesitated, stiffening slightly. Emily pouted, obviously unhappy. Emily should come, too, Mrs. Carter added. It's along the way anyway. She glanced at me. I nodded again, agreeing without objection. The whole family seemed a little surprised. After all, just a couple of days ago, I had openly embarrassed them in front of everyone. But in my mind, I was thinking going to the city would be the perfect chance to buy a bus ticket out. I wouldn't even have to come up with an excuse. Perfect, Jason. I could finally leave you. I'd waited 2 lifetimes for this day. 2 days later, just before dawn, Jason gently pulled Emily out from under the covers and patiently helped her freshen up before coming to knock on my door. But I opened it before he could. He was clearly stunned when he saw me already dressed and packed. Why are you carrying such a big bag? I held my travel bag tightly and replied flatly, brought some food. Emily bounced out from behind him and frowned. Lily, we're going to the city, not farming in the fields. Why bring food? They have food there, you know. Jason was a little annoyed too. Fine, bring it if you want. Just don't complain halfway and make me carry it. But nothing could shake my mood that day. Don't worry, I said firmly. I won't. We were riding in the village chief's pig transport truck. In this era, owning a truck was already a big deal. Jason gently helped Emily onto the truck, and even laid down newspaper for her, so she wouldn't dirty her clothes. I climbed up on my own, struggling, and found a random spot in a corner to sit. A woman from a neighboring village watched Jason and Emily's affectionate behavior, and couldn't help but tease them. Oh my, you 2 newlyweds. So close already. Your man is even more considerate than my old one ever was. Emily's face flushed with embarrassment, and Jason froze awkwardly, unsure how to respond. The village chief quickly jumped in to explain. Ma'am, you've got it wrong. This is his wife. The woman turned and looked over at me, sitting in the corner, eyes full of confusion. She didn't say much more but mumbled under her breath. I thought concubines were outlawed after the revolution. And yet, here he is flaunting his mistress while the wife sits in the corner. Her voice was soft, but everyone in the truck heard it loud and clear, especially Emily. Her face turned bright red, and she subtly pulled herself away from Jason's arms. Jason's expression was dark with embarrassment, and when no one was looking, he shot me a glare full of resentment. I ignored the entire farce. All I could think about was tightly clutching the bag in my hand. It held all my hopes. Once we got off the truck and the crowd began to scatter, Jason looked at me with increasing impatience. His tone was cold as he said, "Here's $5. Go buy yourself some clothes. Be back here at 3 p.m. sharp." With that, he threw the crumpled 5 yuan into my arms without a second glance and walked away with Emily by his side. Before she left, Emily turned back and gave me a look full of pity. I bent down, picked up the money, and tucked it into my pocket. I knew perfectly well that Mrs. Carter had given Jason 50 yuan, but in his eyes, I was only worth 5. It didn't matter anymore. I had already told Grandpa Louis that he didn't need to send any more money. The money he sent before would be enough to sever all ties between us. I turned and headed toward the station. And when I finally boarded that train to Beijing, tears that I had held back for decades began to fall. After wasting away so many years in that village, I had never even imagined there could be another kind of life for me. I was sent to live with the Carters when I was 5, and the man I spent the most time around was Jason. Inevitably, I fell in love with him. But to him, I was just a little sister, a housemaid, a tool, never a wife. That love I held on to for more than 10 years. Maybe it was never real love. Maybe it was just an obsession. If my parents could see me from heaven, see how I spent my past life revolving around a man and his family, they'd probably be heartbroken. But it's okay. I'm grateful to the heavens for giving me a second chance. Maybe it was my parents up there who couldn't bear to see me suffer anymore, who wished for me to be reborn. I hoped this time my life would shine brightly. When I arrived in Beijing, I first went to the capital hospital and handed in several strands of hair for a test. After that, I followed an address to Grandpa Lewis's home. It had been many, many years since I'd last set foot in Beijing. Standing in front of the solemn and imposing Lewis residence, I couldn't help but feel a bit timid and uneasy. But when the young housemaid saw me, she looked delighted. "You must be Miss Lily, right? The old master told us you'd be arriving in the next few days. Please come in. He's just playing chess now." I nodded and stood at the door, stomping my shoes several times to knock off the dried mud before stepping into the Lewis household. The house was even quieter than I remembered. In the large living room, 2 elderly gentlemen were seated at a chessboard. When Grandpa Lewis saw me, he slammed a chess piece down, scattering the board, and immediately grabbed his cane to come meet me. Behind him, the other gentleman shouted, "Lewis, you cheating rascal!" But Grandpa Lewis's eyes were brimming with tears. He looked me up and down and said, "Good girl, you've been through so much." Just those few simple words were enough to soothe the decades of pain buried in my heart. I stepped forward and hugged him. Tears streamed down my face, bittersweet but full of new hope. I told Grandpa Lewis everything about what had happened in the countryside. The more he listened, the angrier he became. The other elderly gentleman next to him also looked serious. "Child, leave it to me. That marriage, even if he doesn't want a divorce, he's getting one. This is a new society. Women in our country aren't meant to be mistreated." Only then did Grandpa Lewis introduce him to me. Professor Ge, one of his closest friends. According to Grandpa Lewis, Professor Ge's wife worked for the Women's Federation. When she heard about my situation, she was heartbroken. Without hesitation, she filed an application to the authorities to initiate a forced divorce on my behalf. When she learned that I had been accepted into Tsinghua University, Professor Ge looked at me with even more admiration. Before I left, he gave me a meaningful reminder. "Focus on your studies." It wasn't until later that Grandpa Lewis told me Professor Ge was a senior professor in the chemistry department at Tsinghua. Ironically, the very subject I wanted to study in this life. Classes wouldn't begin for another month, and under Grandpa Lewis's warm insistence, I stayed at the Lewis home. I had worried that other members of his family might object. But to my surprise, everyone in the Lewis family was just as kind-hearted as he was. He had 2 sons and a daughter, all of whom were already married. After school, their children would fill the house with laughter and chatter. Uncle Leo and Uncle Owen chatted with me about my academic plans, while Aunt Clara pulled me into her arms with such tenderness, it made my heart ache. Since my parents passed away, I hadn't felt this kind of warmth in so long, and I vowed to repay the kindness of the entire Lewis family. Every day, I helped tutor Grandpa Lewis's grandchildren with their studies. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, the first day of school had arrived. I said goodbye to Grandpa Lewis and decided to move into the dorms at Tsinghua. At his request, I promised to come back every week for a family dinner. Before leaving for the dorm, I mailed out 2 copies of the paternity test results and a letter. What I didn't know was that my departure had already caused chaos back in the Carter household. When Jason and Emily returned to the village, they didn't even notice I wasn't in the truck. In their eyes, they only had each other. Why would they care whether I had gotten on or not? It wasn't until both kids had soiled their beds and Mrs. T Carter started yelling for me to come clean it up, that someone finally realized I was missing. There was no answer. Jason finally remembered he'd left me behind in the city. Mrs. Carter told him to hurry back and find me, but Jason brushed it off, thinking she was overreacting. She's not a kid anymore. It's not like she can't find her way home, he said, then turned right back to sweet-talking Emily, ignoring the crying children. Emily did feel bad for the kids, but the awful smell was enough to make someone like her, who had never lifted a finger in her life, back away in disgust. In the end, it was Mrs. Carter who had to clean everything up, cursing my name under her breath the whole time, vowing that if I dared come back, she'd teach me a lesson. But after 4 or 5 days with no sign of me, the whole family began to realize something was wrong. Jason borrowed the village chief's truck again, and went back to the city to look for me. When the village chief asked where Lily was, Jason stammered, saying I had gone to visit a cousin in the city. The chief was suspicious. After all, he knew I'd been adopted and there was no cousin to speak of. When they arrived in the county, Jason dragged some of his fellow army recruits to help him search. They looked from sunrise to sunset, asked everyone they could, but found no trace of me. Jason took a deep breath. He had never expected me to cause him this much trouble. Furious, but holding it in, he continued the search. Only one older woman at the ticket booth seemed to recognize the description. You mean the young girl in the yellow blouse with the ponytail? About this much taller than me? She asked, gesturing with her hand. Jason lit up. Yes, that's her. Do you know where she went? The woman smiled. She took a train to Beijing. She said she was going to college. It hit Jason like a thunderclap. Lily went to the capital for college. What about their home? Their family? Jason stumbled back home in a daze. Mrs. Carter rushed to him. Jason, still stunned, exploded in frustration when he saw her. Mom, why didn't you tell me Lily got into college? She's gone to Beijing, to the capital. She's never coming back. Mrs. Carter's face turned ghostly pale. Mr. Matt Carter dropped his pipe. It hit the floor and snapped clean in half. Emily came out from the bedroom holding one of the kids, her face full of shock. Mrs. Carter slumped into a chair, completely drained. It's my fault. I should have hidden her ID. I should have known she wanted to run. Then she seemed to realize something. She hadn't received any money or ration coupons that month. She must have gone to the Lewis family in Beijing. Let's go get her back. She was born a Carter. She'll die a Carter. The Lewis family has no right to take away our daughter-in-law. Mr. Carter picked up the broken pipe and wiped it carefully with his shirt. His expression was calm, but his voice carried authority. Yes, we need to bring her back. He glanced at the child in Emily's arms. Otherwise, who's going to raise my grandchildren? Only then did Jason remember that both he and Emily were supposed to leave the village in a month. Neither of them could afford to let the children get in the way of their futures. So he nodded and decided to go to the city with the village chief in 2 days to buy a ticket to Beijing. That night, Emily lay on the edge of the bed, thoughts racing. She rolled over and said to Jason, I didn't expect Lily got into college too. I wonder which one it is. Jason, irritated, replied, What kind of college could she possibly get into? Probably just a vocational school or something. Then he paused as if ashamed to even admit she was his wife. His eyes turned to Emily like she was some rare treasure. No matter what school she got into, she'll never compare to you. For someone like her, going to school is a waste of money. You, on the other hand, have a bright future. Emily smirked smugly, clearly satisfied with his answer. Back then, getting into college was already incredibly rare, let alone a teaching university in Beijing. People from all over the neighboring towns were envious, praising Jason like he was something special. But while Jason was still dreaming about dragging me back, the village chief brought devastating news. The very next day, I had mailed a legally binding divorce order from the capital. When she heard the news, Mrs. Carter nearly fainted. Mr. Carter, usually calm and composed, completely lost his temper and shouted, Unbelievable. This is outrageous. Jason's mind went blank. He turned to the village chief, hoping for help. But the chief just shook his head. Jason, this is an official order. I don't have the authority to intervene. What's done is done. From what I hear, Lily got into Tingwa University. You all better not go bothering her anymore. Even the village chief had been shocked when he received the document. Though he'd seen plenty of official paperwork in his time, this was the first time he'd encountered a forced divorce order issued by the Women's Federation. He and the other village officials had studied it carefully and realized it wasn't a discussion, it was a declaration. The document formally stated that Lily Carter and Jason Carter were no longer husband and wife, and that both were now free to marry as they pleased. Attached was also a full report of all the money and ration tickets the Lewis family had sent over the years. The total was staggering. Even the village chief was stunned. The Carter family is insatiable, he thought. That amount of money could have raised 10 girls like Lily with the best care. Even Lily's tuition and school fees had been covered. Clearly, the Lewis family had placed high hopes in her. Yet the Carters had forced her to drop out and marry Jason early on. And ever since, they had treated her with disdain. Nothing she did was ever good enough. People in the village had seen everything. What she wore, how hard she worked, and just by looking at the oily hair and bloated faces of Mr. and Mrs. Carter, everyone knew exactly where the money had gone. Fortunately, Lily had persevered and gotten into Tingwa University entirely through her own efforts, a name-brand school and all through self-study. Under the village chief's firm gaze, Mr. and Mrs. Carter looked extremely uncomfortable. He didn't stay long. After handing over the papers, he left, leaving the Carter family embarrassed and stunned in their own living room. "She's really not coming back?" Mrs. Carter asked weakly, her voice still carrying a sliver of hope. Jason felt like something had been ripped out of him. His chest was hollow. For the first time, he realized what it meant to lose something real. Emily sat nearby, utterly speechless. She had never imagined someone like Lily could actually get into a top-tier university like Singa. Just days ago, she had flaunted herself in front of Lily, who had said nothing at the time but may well have been secretly laughing at her. Meanwhile, I walked out of the lab with my senior, Thomas Gu, still discussing the chemical formulas from our latest experiment. Suddenly, a female classmate came running toward me, looking anxious. "Lily, someone's waiting for you at the school gate. They said something happened at home." My heart dropped. Did something happen to Grandpa Lewis? I hurriedly said goodbye to Thomas and rushed toward the gate. Before I even got there, I heard a voice shouting, "I came to get my wife. Who are you to stop me?" It was Jason's voice. The moment he saw me, his face lit up. "Lily, let's go home. My parents are sick." I looked at him expressionless. If Mr. and Mrs. Carter are sick, they should see a doctor. Besides, Emily can take care of them. Why are you here for me? Jason flinched at how I addressed his parents but still forced a smile and said, "Lily, I know you hold a grudge against us, but think about how my parents raised you. Isn't it time to let go of that anger? After all, a daughter-in-law should care for her in-laws. You may have gotten into Tinghua, but that doesn't mean you can be ungrateful." His words caused some of the students nearby, who'd already gathered out of curiosity, to glance at me, their expressions uncertain. But this was a university, and these were educated people. No one rushed to judge without knowing the full story. Just then, Emily finally stepped out from wherever she had been hiding. Her voice trembled as she tried to twist the situation. "Lily, I know you're jealous of how close Jason and I are, but we're cousins. How could you abandon your own children and in-laws like this? Don't you know how much the kids miss their mom?" As soon as she finished speaking, Emily picked up the two scruffy-looking children from the rickshaw. They were bawling at the top of their lungs. Emily set the poor kids down right in front of everyone, putting them on display. That was when the crowd around us started to waver. "Lily, if what they're saying is true, maybe you really should go back and take care of your family. Yeah, the kids are innocent. Since you gave birth to them, you should raise them too. Education is important, sure, but you should also value the people right in front of you. That guy still looks like he really loves you." I gave a cold, silent smile. I didn't bother arguing with my classmates. I knew they were being manipulated, but public opinion, it wasn't something only Jason could influence. I turned and looked at him. "Jason, did your unit kick you out? Is that why you suddenly have time to come all the way here and cause trouble?" Then I looked at Emily and you. "Did you not end up going to college after all? Or was it because the truth about you sneaking into someone else's marriage and having twins out of wedlock came out? Jason and Emily's faces turned pale with embarrassment. Shame and frustration flickered across their features. I knew I was right. Before the semester started, I knew a single divorce document wouldn't be enough to stop the shameless Carter family from bothering me again. So I mailed a report to both Jason's military unit and the university Emily had been accepted to. A month later, both of their dreams shattered. Jason's shot at a military career and Emily's college admission. After all, in institutions as serious as the Army and university, there was no place for people with such disgraceful histories. When Mrs. Carter got the news, she was so furious she fell sick. Mr. Carter, who already had chronic lung issues from smoking, collapsed on the spot after hearing it. And with no one left to care for the twins, Jason and Emily were left completely overwhelmed. Thinking about how I was now living peacefully in Beijing, attending college must have only made their bitterness worse. That's probably why they dragged the children here to confront me. But when I pulled out the paternity test results and a record of all the money and ration coupons the Lewis family had sent over the years, my classmates began to see things clearly. One after another, they turned to Jason and Emily and started scolding them. These were educated people, so even though their words weren't harsh, they hit where it hurt. You two really tried to twist the story and play the victim first. What? Your pea glows in the dark or something? You seriously can't see who you really are. One of you is shameless and the other has skin thicker than a wall. You're truly made for each other. Lily, you're like a fallen phoenix that got trapped in a chicken coop. How did you end up stuck with these parasites of a family? Jason and Emily were red-faced with humiliation. Something in their expressions snapped and Jason stormed toward me, trying to drag me away. I didn't have time to react before he pulled me several feet. Just as I opened my mouth to scream, bam! A fist landed squarely on Jason's face, knocking him to the ground. It was Thomas Gu, my senior. Thomas stepped forward and shielded me behind him. Jason, stunned, looked up from the ground and roared in disbelief. So this is your new man, huh? You threw away our family for him? He lunged again, but Thomas effortlessly took him down a second time. Maybe it was the unity of students at the same school, or maybe they were just disgusted by Jason's behavior. But even the most bookish among them took the chance to give him a few solid kicks. By the time campus security finally arrived, Jason's face was black and blue. Emily rushed to pull him up. I stood before him and declared loudly, Jason Carter, I owe your family nothing. The money your parents spent raising me doesn't even amount to 1/10 of what Grandpa Lewis sent. I ate your food, yes, but I never once shirked housework. You and Emily were already sneaking around behind my back, so don't you dare say I abandoned you. Everyone walks their own path. From now on, we are nothing to each other. If you ever come after me again, don't blame me for what happens next. Jason was stunned into silence. After a long pause, he slunk away with Emily, humiliated. They never came back to bother me again. For years later, I walked out of Professor Gu's office, holding the results of my latest research in my hands. Professor Gu told me that our work would help break foreign restrictions on our nation's systems, especially in the field of aerospace and propulsion. This would mark a major breakthrough for our country. The flood of good news made my heart flutter with joy like a bird soaring through clear skies. Thomas came by and invited me to dinner. I accepted without hesitation. During our meal, he raised a glass and congratulated me on my success. I smiled and looked at him. Thomas teased me. Without your help, I probably would have taken a lot longer to achieve these results. When he smiled, there was a warmth in his eyes that I dared not face. I looked away, flustered, but he gently took my hand. I understand you, he said. You've devoted your life to chemistry. You'll dedicate your whole future to it, but don't forget to look around you once in a while. Okay. I lowered my head and after a long pause, gave a solemn nod. Later, Grandpa Lewis told me what had become of Jason. He'd lost his position in the military and stayed home all day, drunk and useless. He didn't bother looking for work or caring for the kids. Emily never got to attend college. She was completely weighed down by the two children and the Carter family. She lasted less than a year before abandoning them and running off. That left Jason alone. dragging 2 kids around while trying to take care of his parents. But he was never the careful or considerate type. Within a few years, his parents developed severe bedsores from neglect, and the pain left them writhing in bed day and night. Jason did nothing. He let them die in agony. As for the children, no one disciplined them. They skipped school and got into fights. A neighbor even mocked them to their faces, saying, "Your real mom is even worse than your old foster one. You're both just as useless as she is." When the 2 kids heard they had a foster mother doing well in the city, they came home crying every day, begging to go find me. Maybe Jason was drunk again. Maybe he forgot everything I'd told him. Whatever the reason, he bought 3 train tickets and headed for the capital. He never made it. So drunk he couldn't stand straight, he collapsed onto the train tracks and never got up again. When the 2 children finally found me, they looked like little beggars, filthy and worn out. They were crying when they told me that before he died, their father had kept repeating the same thing. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I want to start over, Lily. Wait for me." By then, I had already been awarded a national medal for significant scientific contribution, and had become the youngest academician at the National Research Institute. I told the children the truth about everything. And even though they begged me not to, I still sent them to a welfare center, because showing them mercy would have meant being cruel to the person I used to be. I stood there holding my trophy, surrounded by flashing cameras, and I thought I saw my old self standing in the light, her lips moving silently, mouthing the words, "Keep walking forward. Don't look back." In the crowd clapping for me, Thomas stood still, meeting my gaze with calm, unwavering eyes. And I told myself, I won't look back.